I'm CK. Tonight I wanted to take a look at the first of a few modules from Erica Synths. It's in their MKI ES educational series, where you'll put together a module with a user manual that will help you learn exactly what's going on, so potentially you can go in the future and design your own synth. As they say, it's not simply meant to solder the manual together, put it in your rack and forget about it. So we'll take a look at it, we'll see what the kit goes together with, if it is a really good beginner kit, and we'll take a look at the user manual too. Hope you enjoy the video. Here's the box, and as I mentioned, we're going to be starting with their VCO, because if I were going to be teaching somebody about synths, I would, and I have, started folks off with the simplest part, the basic part, which is an oscillator. So let's open the box and see what a beginner would see right off the bat from Erica in this area. I picked this up from thonk.uk.co.uk, where I get many of my synth modules. Let's see, we've got a bag with our basic resistors, some very tiny caps, some trimmers, a controller, oh no, that's a decade counter, and a op amp. In here we've got some knobs and power connector, a couple of pots, and a few jacks. Nice long eurorack power cord, even though the red stripe is actually dotted, not a stripe. I'm not sure I like that. It's a little harder to see, and in a dark room or on a stage or something, that may be really hard to discern if you want to switch modules in the middle of a show. Here's the front panel. With what you'd probably expect: a coarse tuning pot, fine, pulse width, modulation level, and PWM CV level. So there's the pulse width modulation CV input, I'm going to assume. 1 volt per octave voltage in for note, frequency modulation control voltage, then output of saw and pulse. Now, I'm already going to say this. If I were doing this for an educational purpose, I would follow the convention of having no highlight on inputs and highlight on outputs, or the reverse, whichever you want to do. But if you're providing something particularly to someone who may not know that much about eurorack or modular synths, indicating which are inputs and which are outputs, I think would be beneficial. Take a look at the circuit board. Schematics by Morris Klein, PCB by Ingus Petrus and from Erica Synths. And as you can see, there's only one board, so components go here, and controls and jacks go here. And it's an interesting layout for the power connector. I wonder why they did that. They also did what I don't like. I'll be back in a second. The circuit board and the front panel are, as typical, come from a 3 across by 3 across or 4 by 4 board of many circuit boards, and they broke them apart for us, but they didn't smooth off the edges. So I just grab a little 400 grit sandpaper and smooth those break marks off. You don't have to do this. I just like to. I don't like to have rough edges. Okay, now I feel better. They've got a couple of things on YouTube, which I am not going to look at. For each kit there's an extensive user manual, can be downloaded separately, but I don't see where I can download that separately. So let me go to the specific module. Interesting that there's not a link to it in the kit or a UPC to guide you to it. Yeah, they should put that in there. Okay, oscillator basics. Good. Oscillator core. 4 components: resistor, capacitor, diode, and a Schmitt trigger inverter. Okay, good. Oh, and they suggest you do a breadboard so you can play around with it. I agree with that as a good goal. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to be doing it strictly on the board, but this is a very thorough introduction to oscillators. Now we're into tuning and temperature compensation, different waveforms. So this is all very good, and again, you can lay it all out on a breadboard. In fact, maybe I will do that. Well, I got a quarter of the way into breadboarding this out and then got tired and said, no, I don't like breadboarding all that much, so we'll skip that. One thing I will say, the user's manual is very good about teaching electronics and teaching how a synthesizer and a VCO work. I will say that their breadboard directions are kind of not for beginners. It's interesting. The text is for somebody who's just getting into it, but the breadboard diagrams and telling people what to actually do and what components go where and which components are which is sorely lacking. And it's also interesting that the author talks about the waveforms and pulse width and so on, and talks about looking at it on your oscilloscope. But if you're just starting in modular synths and this is your first thing you're going to be working on, I don't think you have an oscilloscope, but with software oscilloscopes now, maybe you do. So I'm just going to go ahead and assemble it, and we'll see how it sounds, and we'll see how the actual assembly goes. So we will of course start off, as is typical, with all the resistors, which means, where did I put that rack of, oh, I lost my rack of 100Ks by putting the circuit board on top of it. And as traditional in my videos with putting resistors on, there's not much to talk about, so I will put them all on and have fast playback on the video and skip some parts. So it's resistor time, folks. Okay, resistor time's over, and as you can see here, there are 1, 2, 3 stand-up resistors, or as I call them, oops resistors. So if you're looking for where they are on the board, just look for a place where stand-up resistors would make sense to be, and you'll find them. It's a typical symbol is two holes next to each other, a circle around one of the holes, and a line connecting that circle to the other hole. That tells you that it's a stand-up resistor goes in that spot. Now we'll put the sockets on the board in my typical way. Take the socket, put it through the holes in the board, rest it on your pinky or ring finger, the back of your hand, or the back of the board. Then solder one leg down, flip it back over, take a look, make sure everything's flush and to the ground, and to the board, and then go ahead and solder the rest of the pins. If it's not flat to the board, or if it's at an angle or something like that, you just press on it firmly and use your soldering iron and heat up that one pin, that one solder ball you've already made, and it'll melt and you'll feel the socket go into place. Let the solder cool, and then you're all set. Oh, I forgot. I'm going to do the diodes also. There are two. There's a 4148. And where is that? That's right here. That wire those leads got a little crumpled because I had it in the breadboard, and I didn't trim the leads because I knew I was going to be putting it on this board later, so it got a little cattywampus. Now I'll put the other main power protection diodes in. And always remember, on these 5019s, the leads are much thicker than your typical component lead, which means they take a little bit more heat to get a good solder connection. Okay, let's put some caps on. These are little power buffer caps for the chips. 0.1 microfarad, 104s, they're very, very common. See them all over the place. And the two electrolytics. One transistor. Two transistors, I'm sorry. I was looking. I think they're both the same. Nope. One's a 48, one's a 58. So make sure you get them right. This is the 58, and it goes, oh, that's funny. He spreads the middle leg, the gate leg, towards the flat side instead of towards the rounded side. That's backwards from almost every other circuit board I've ever seen. And the trimmer with a nice indicator for where the screw goes. Now that trimmer is not quite flat to the board, and it's also not perpendicular. So like I say, just push your thumb against it from one side, heat that one leg that you just did, let it cool, and it's all flat. No muss, no fuss. Now we'll put the power connector on. And as I like to do, I'm going to get the power cable with it just to verify that we're doing it the correct way, with the red stripe towards the negative side. And that, oh, let me go ahead and put the chips on. Now I have to be a little careful. When I breadboarded this and pulled the chips out of the breadboard, I bent some pins. I've got spares of these in my bench stock, but I'd rather not use them if I don't have to. That one went in okay. No, it didn't go in okay. I put it in backwards. We don't want to do that. Ouch. So we'll put it in the correct way. And that's the board. The electronic side of the board. Now we'll do the jacks and pots and so on. So we've got a 1 meg, 200K, and one 250. There's the 25. We'll put the 25, 250 in right now. Ah, the pins are all bent up on that too, aren't they? And I always put the pots on the board first because they've got the locking legs which can jolt the board a little bit as you put them in, so you don't want to, and the jacks don't. So if you don't put the pots in first, you put the jacks on the board first. When you put the pots in, you're going to bounce the jacks out. So put the pots in first. Now let's grab our face plate. Oh, that fits very well. That's nice. That's a nice fit. I'm gonna solder one pin on that pot, solder one pin on one pot, and one pin on one jack, and put a panel nut. On that jack, and a panel nut on the pot. Tighten them finger tight. And that will hold the contraption together so you can easily solder all the other pins. Now the only thing I can see here that's a challenge is the coarse tuning pot pins are right up against the chip socket. So just be careful. Try not to melt the plastic on the chip socket. Next thing I'm going to do before I tighten all the panel nuts down is get my little index card and look at all the solder joints, making sure I've got all the front panel controls connected. Okay, now put the rest of the jacks on. And we'll put the knob on the coarse pot. Plug the power cable in for real this time. And that's it. It's the back, side, top, bottom, other side, and the front panel. So that's how it goes together. Very straightforward build, except for the stand-up resistors that if you haven't done a bunch of boards and seen that, you might not know where that goes, but they just stand up like that. Again, I don't like them because I believe they're very error prone for a lot of reasons. But they're the, oops, we need another voltage control in here, afterthought resistor. Now we'll go ahead and put it in the rack and calibrate the voltage range and see how it sounds. Okay, so let's tune her a little bit. Let me bring my tuner up. We'll go to C on this. And now we'll see what the octave looks like. Okay, so the octaves needs a little adjustment. Let me get a screwdriver. So I will put my screwdriver in the adjustment slot in the trimmer. It helps when you have a very open test rig like this. I did a video showing how I build these, but I haven't ever posted it. Came out of the screw. Let's change the low too, so let's take a look at the low again. Yeah, it sharpened it up, so let me unsharpen it a little bit. It's a balance between being in tune and getting the right octave. So I think you can see that. It's a little high on that C, and it's a little low on that C, but it's pretty good. That, of course, it's just been turned on, so it's still warming up. So. That's the pulse wave. Change the frequency modulation level. Try the pulse width, way broad. Which of course doesn't matter when we're not in pulse. Let's go into pulse. That sounds pretty good, actually. I like that. Let me plug it into the little sequencer. So that's the way it sounds. Sounds pretty nice. I'm going to try something. I don't know whether this is going to do any interesting things at all, but because this is a clock, not an LFO. But I'll try it. Oh no, it does. And again, because that's just a clock, it's hitting it really hard, really fast. If I had an LFO out here, I could mess around with it better, but I don't. It's in my other studio. So that's it. It's a good little oscillator when you get done. Now again, the best part of this is probably the user's manual, because the user manual is an excellent practical tutorial in electronics and will be very helpful if you want to learn it. In fact, you don't even have to buy this. You can just go to their website and download that user manual and learn quite a bit. The build guide's a little loose around being specific, so if you're a beginner, just take your time and look closely at the pictures, and the bill of materials will guide you where parts go if the word of instructions and the pictures don't quite show you what it's supposed to be. But it's a good unit, relatively inexpensive, and you can learn a lot. Thanks for watching.